Aloha. So I wanted to create a quick video about insecurities and authenticity and the profound danger of being authentic as much as possible in a world of inauthentic people, being a secure person in a world of narcissists, etc. And recognizing the differences and the nuances of those things. So there's certain types of people that are going to be more likely to do introspection in general. People who have experienced a lot of trauma, people who have had a lot of hardship, people who maybe are autistic or have ADHD, generally. Now, sometimes there's crossover between the two groups two general tribes I'm going to talk about. But generally speaking, those groups have spent a lot of their lives being told everything is wrong with them. And so they are constantly monitoring and trying to figure out how other people behave and how to either emulate other people or how to at least behave in a way that doesn't offend other people. So there's a lot of introspection involved there because you have to have an awareness of your own behavior in order to behave differently. And for one thing, that can be very exhausting because it's a lot of social energy required to pretend all the time and to change oneself constantly. And what I encountered at some point, because I had done a lot of this throughout my life, was that when the mask started to break down, when I stopped being able to hide my real self because I just got exhausted from doing so, that it wasn't received very well. People really did not like who I really was. And keep in mind, I'm now an adult and I'm like, this is kind of irrational. Why are people treating me poorly when I'm not that different from them? I may express things differently, have different mannerisms. I might be more blunt, but why is it that my direct communication is always taken in an offense when their very indirect, weird communication is seen as the norm? It seems bizarre to me. It seems extraordinary, strange. And of course, I'm unfortunately very accustomed to having to pretend around others. And what I realized is that basically everybody is doing that by default, at least in my country, in this moment in history. I don't really know good enough information about history on a nuanced level to know how people have acted in the past or how they act in other countries. I'm not well traveled enough to know. But I know that in my country, in this time period, even on this island out here, that people tend to they have a lot of insecurities, and they will do a lot of work to hide them or to dress them up as something fancier than they really are. And so often you'll see this in various circles. You'll see it as identity politics. In my opinion, identity politics is a way of dressing up insecurities. So there's a lot of trauma, right? And instead of seeing that we can probably all meet in the middle somewhere for the most part. There are genuinely bigoted, awful people out there, but there's also a lot more good people that are probably capable of seeing eye to eye with you and are just either being manipulated, or maybe they don't have the same stream of information that you do. Maybe you're both receiving opposing streams of information and it's hard to tell what's true and what isn't. Maybe you have different styles of processing, so different information sticks out to you and gets you fired up. But there's probably a way to see eye to eye if both sides are willing to try. That is, of course, if we're talking about the side of people that do introspection. But then there's the other side. There's personality types which are so deep into insecurity, shame, not guilt, shame, which is a different... Shame is essentially identifying with being a bad person, being guilty, whatever. Guilt is merely a signal that says, hey, you did something wrong, you should change it. And of course, analyze your guilt and determine whether it's shame, because I think a lot of us that have had a lot of traumas, we feel that traumatized feeling, and it triggers shame rather than, or it triggers guilt rather than shame, and we don't really recognize the difference maybe. And we get in spirals, because we think like, I don't know how to change this behavior or whatever, and we don't see it as a trauma response or whatever. But there's definitely some personality types that are a bit dangerous in this regard, because they tend to really struggle with introspection, and that in of itself is very difficult. So there's people with avoidant attachment styles, tend to be very difficult to convince them to introspect and actually analyze their own behavior. There's people with narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy or sociopathy or Machiavellianism. They tend to be very difficult to get across to, how their behaviors might be harming them or others, or convince them to do introspection, because these types tend to shut down. And definitely in my experiences, neurotypical people are much more likely to not do any introspection than neurodivergent people. Neurodivergence just inherently comes with, you are a minority, and so you're forced to introspect, because you are forced to live in a world where you're often told you're wrong in some way, or presented, every flaw in you is presented to you and mirrored back to you tenfold, and is basically written off. You're written off as a terrible person because you have these flaws often. Excuse me. And so you will naturally try to mask them. But the narcissist, the neurotypical, and these other groups that don't tend to do introspection, they don't develop the mask from the same place. Their mask comes a lot from manipulation, so more than it is from like what seems to be sort of a toxic compassion or toxic empathy. So I think the neurodivergent type tends to have a bit of a toxic empathy problem oftentimes. We will be deeply afraid of hurting others, or hurting others' feelings, or not giving people what they need from us, and so we will go out of our way to help, or go out of our way to be kind, or out of our way to give people what they want, to our own detriment. That's in a way a form of manipulation, but it's our way of avoiding being harmed. We're afraid of harm. We're afraid that someone will attempt to assassinate our reputation, whatever it is. And so we tend to mask for that reason. And our masking looks like a lot of compassion, a lot of kind acts, and then occasional failures of the mask where we have an explosive temper or whatever it is. And this was something I struggled with for a very long time. Now I would say when I get angry, it's much more of a righteous anger, and people might, it's intense. Anger is intense, but it's not so much of a violent intense, not so much of a, I want to do this violent act. It's more of a, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking in the most direct way possible, which I think is a profoundly mature thing to do, especially when that is your natural communication style anyway. But what a narcissist will do, or a neurotypical generally will do, or a profoundly insecure person will generally do, someone who doesn't do a lot of introspection, what they will do is they will take that confrontation and try to bury it. They will try to deflect onto you. They won't take accountability. They won't see your side, because they don't have that experience of having to understand the other side in order to get by. And that's dangerous. Really, really, really dangerous. So if you're really, really authentic, if you're really honest all the time, you will encounter people who will use it against you because that authenticity confronts parts of themselves they have not resolved yet. It confronts their flaws. And it's just simply because, to be honest, you're better than them. Simply because, in my opinion, simply because you're being honest about who you are. If your flaws are just visible on the surface and your good qualities, the thing is, the typical thing, the norm, is to put on an act. And so, if you're not putting on that act, people don't really know how to react to that generally. I think the only people that really understand how to handle someone who's being authentic is other authentic people. Because authenticity initially comes with some pretty righteous, intense emotions, but I think over time it settles into this fairly peaceful thing. It can seem maybe a little cold or detached, but it's more of just I've seen your type before, your patterns, your insecurities, and I'm just not interested in dealing with that because I know how dangerous it is. So what does this look like in a practical sense? If you're authentic with someone, I'll give you an example from my life. I've had a few situations where I knew I was dating someone, and I knew, now, I'm going to be upfront and say I have been a terrible partner at times. Awful. I have been the worst at times, just because of my own insecurities that I hadn't dealt with at the time, my own flaws, and my lack of emotional understanding of myself, emotional intelligence and introspection in those areas. But I've had situations where I was dating someone and I knew I was not the bad guy in that situation. And I would try to confront, I was coming at these relationships truly from the absolute highest possible intention, trying to do everything in a way where it was keeping that person happy, maybe to an extreme, to a toxic empathy level, perhaps, where I was basically watching their emotions and trying to give them what they wanted. But I was really trying to be a truly kind and good person to that person. And I would say maybe it's not a toxic empathy thing in this case, because the example I'm thinking of is a situation where I was just straightforward and honest. When I had a problem with this person, I would tell them, and they would know. I've also had ones where I wasn't so good at communicating, but I believe I was acting in the highest good, and similar things happened though, so I don't know. It varies because you deal with different personalities too, The other person is a different person, everybody you meet, and I struggle with that. I often feel like everybody must be the same as me, not out of arrogance or belief that I'm superior, but just it's hard for me to understand why anyone's brain would work differently sometimes. It's called mind blindness. But what I've noticed is that when I would confront the person and say, look, you're doing this thing and it doesn't feel good, and I wouldn't attack them. It might come out as, hey, you're doing this and I don't like it. But it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't have anger really behind it. It might have intensity, I'm looking at you intensely. It's hard, I do not look at the camera very well, but I'm looking at you intensely and I'm telling you what's frustrating me about this relationship right now. But I wasn't, fuck you, I hate you, no. Or you're a bad person, you suck. I haven't done that in a long time. The only people that I think I attack are people that are willing to lead huge groups of people to the slaughter. That's when I'm like, okay, this is an awful person. Or when someone's willing to participate in that knowingly, that's a whole other thing. But when it comes to interpersonal relationship dynamics, I'm like, okay, I don't like that you're doing this to me. It hurts, and please don't do it, or just can you see my perspective and not do this anymore? And I don't really have a whole lot of patience I don't give people a whole lot of chances anymore, simply because it's it's just too much. It takes too much energy away from me, and I have too much to do already in my life. I have too much effort I have to apply in my day-to-day life to survive, to justify putting all that effort in. So to try to resolve it with someone, especially when, I can tell their heart's not in it. If I see that someone's really, really trying and then they slip up, I do that. That's a failure mode that I can empathize with. I understand. I've experienced cognitively. I can empathize with it, on an understanding level. So of course I'm not gonna, give up on someone just because of, maybe stumbling and failing, and they've got a pattern ingrained in them and they mess up. But, well, an example is that I was dating this woman and she was insulting me a lot. She insulted me basically every conversation. She would find a reason to insult me or put me down, belittle me, patronize me, whatever. And in general, in that relationship, I'm the one who has my shit together. I'm the one who's transporting us to do things we need to do. I'm helping her with a bunch of her stuff in her daily life that she can't address because she doesn't have it together in the same way. I'm basically helping her keep her life together, and I'm also in, an emotional and physical sense, I'm letting her set the pace, and I'm trying to meet her where her needs are. But, I'm also trying to express my needs. And what I noticed time and again was when I would express my needs or my frustrations, she would try to brush them off and try to act like that was a negative thing, that it was something else. Like, one of the things was she wanted to take it slow physically. And I said, okay, fine, we'll do that. But then she would be all over me. And it's like, okay, so I'm just I'm asking you, is this what you want? And she's like, yes, this is what I want. So, okay, we'll go there. And then, oh, you're a terrible person. You went there and all you want is this. And I'm like, okay, so I went where you wanted me to go. This is, took me in this direction. But this is insecurity. She didn't want to face that was part of her, that she had that desire. And it's like, how can you possibly win in that situation where somebody's always going to use you as the scapegoat for their own insecurities and their own unwillingness to face whatever it is about them that they haven't faced yet? Simple things sometimes, just, hey, I really am not motivated to help you with this thing, would result in a patronizing insult. And it's like, okay, so you're basically treating me like you're entitled to my effort, and yet I'm not having my needs met time and again. I'm expressing maybe that I don't want to be insulted by you, and you will brush it off and say, oh, I was just kidding, or whatever. And look, if you love me, if you care about me, I'm going to tell you I don't like that. That's not for me. And if you do it, I'm going to give up eventually. And I've noticed that, again, that lack of accountability. So what would happen is that she would try to just brush everything off. A common reaction was, okay, let's just stop talking. And it was like, no, I need you to hear this. Why won't you just listen to what I'm saying to you, recognize it, and acknowledge it? And even just that was too much. It was like, as soon as she was being criticized, she would try to shut it down. She would try to say, oh, let's just stop talking, let's just cuddle or whatever. And it's like, you're not hearing me. You haven't acknowledged that you're hearing me. You haven't shown that you care about what I'm saying to you. You haven't shown that you care about how I feel or what I need. So why should I care about what you need, And round and round it can go like that for quite a while. And the problem with this is that, unfortunately, the type of groups that do a lot of this stuff, a lot of this masking insecurities and never facing them, are also groups that tend to be dominant in society. So in some places it's men, some places it's women, in some places it's a certain race, whatever, cultural group, religion. But it tends to be that that identity will protect people from facing their own demons. It'll protect them from basically any sort of criticism, because other members of that group will see you, if you're being authentic and you're not part of that group, as a member of the out group. And a lot of these identities exist as a way to mask insecurity in of themselves. When people identify as, when people identify with their traumas, and that's their primary form of identification, that can be kind of dangerous, because it makes you really wonder, like, what else is there about this person that is relevant? And is the fact that they're identifying with their trauma because they're a genuine victim who needs help, or is it because they use that trauma as a scapegoat now to where they don't have to ever address their own behaviors, you see? So it's a lot of scapegoating, and what you might find is that you become, if you're authentic and you hold a mirror up to that, you might become the new scapegoat. You might be the new person that takes all the blame for everything. And the red flag I noticed with this previous woman is that no woman could do wrong. So if I would say that something had happened to me where it was a woman doing the thing, and it happened to be a negative thing, then she would always try to defend that person. And she also was constantly telling me all these bad things that men do. And the thing is, like, I'm not going to tell you that your experience is invalid. I don't know. I have no proof. But I have started to be a lot more cautious about just accepting what people say about others at face value, especially with this particular relationship I'm talking about, because I realized, it finally clicked, how often people will use these negative experiences with others as a form of social currency. They will use basically a way in which they feel they've been slighted to gain sympathy, to gain respect for having survived this awful thing that's happened, to gain care, basically manipulate others into giving them what they want. And this, in the identity politics world, is super dangerous, because it will mean that, because if you are in an out group in the situation, not the in group, then you're automatically always the scapegoat if you confront anything. And so you have to tiptoe around this group of people now. And that's what I've found with unfortunately a lot of women, is that the act of dating them, the act of approaching them, no matter how careful I am, no matter how I act, no matter how much consent, no matter basically what I do, the problem is that the complete immunity to accountability it's a license for really awful people to do really awful things, like narcissistic smear campaigns, basically just making profound false claims against someone, and doing so simply because maybe that person confronted parts of them that they didn't want to see. I've experienced this because I have been that person that has confronted someone and said, hey, you're doing a behavior that's not benefiting you or anyone else, and it's hurting me right now. I care about you enough to tell you. They don't like that because, again, it's insecurity having a mirror held up to it. And people will invent whole belief systems. This particular person was really into Tantra, and I was like, okay, I'm game, I'll play, and because I don't have a specific belief system really, but I'm not willing to tell people that their belief system is junk by itself, unless it very obviously is, like it's doing harm or something. But I noticed that she used it as like ammunition and a justification to basically give her license to treat all men as lesser than her. And I have seen that in other women, that kind of is coupled with their narcissistic tendencies, with their whatever traumas, whatever combination of factors, so they can treat men horribly. And then I come along And like, again, I have been a terrible partner, but I have repaid that karma 10 times over. I've been a bad friend, I've been a bad partner. I've paid my debts. Trust me, I've had my ass handed to me by life enough. I've paid my debts. And I know about what who I am, what I've done, the mistakes I've made, and I accept it. But what I find is that people will use a lot of these identities as justifications to where they don't have to face any of that stuff. I'm not gonna go around saying I'm autistic, I can get away with whatever I want. Like, no, that's not the truth. That's not fair to the rest of everyone on earth. I have to be accountable to my actions too. So, I'm autistic and I have trauma and chronic pain, therefore I can do whatever I want. No, that's BS, man. Come on. So, and I'm part of a non-dominant culture too. Ooh, bad guy. So, it's BS, but I think most people don't see it because they're trained not to. They're trained to just basically be tribal. It's like, well, just join this group and then suddenly you can have solidarity with that group. Everybody else is a bad guy. You don't ever have to face any of your BS, and you can just carry on doing your BS for your whole life. Never have any kind of vulnerability or deep relationship, and I guess die alone. I don't know. I feel like it's good to commit to either of these paths. Like, if you're gonna be a jerk and you're gonna not introspect at all and you're gonna just hurt other people with that and be super insecure, commit to the bit until it kills you. And if you're gonna introspect and be authentic, unfortunately you have to commit to the bit, because here's the thing: anything bad you do will be used as ammunition for people who have those insecurities and need a scapegoat. So you make any mistakes, you will be a scapegoat, unfortunately. It's pretty dangerous. Oh, and I should probably, to even out the video, I should say that men have, the identity of power, wealth. Women have identity stuff that they use, like, sexual traumas, generally more like victim mentality type stuff, but they'll use that identity stuff as ammunition so they can be narcissistic, just the same way men will use power, money, greed. They'll identify with that, and then they will maybe cleverness, strength, that alpha male. I think it's funny because I feel like I exhibit a lot of the traits that people call alpha male or whatever, and yet I can't stand that subculture. It's just like, oh god, come on. It's just kind of gross the way that because what it is in the gender stuff, and it happens with race too. You're talking about being in Hawaii with Native Hawaiians and white people. It's like it's used as an excuse in both directions. I see racism from white people to Native Hawaiians just the same way Hawaiians. I don't know. How do you say Hawaiians? Because like Hawaii is how you say Hawaii, right? But is it Hawaiians? Anyway, I think actually there's a specific name that the Hawaiian people call themselves, and I can never remember what it is. I'm sorry. Anyway, point is, and I'm trying to learn the language, and it's hard for me to learn languages. I am genuinely trying, though. But anyway, I see racism going both ways, right? But identity politics. So the sides will just be tribal about it, and they will never see eye to eye. And they'll use it as a mask for their insecurities rather than resolving the original grievance. So basically that's the fundamental root, I think, maybe of most human problems is people have insecurities. They don't want to face them because that would mean ego death or ego deconstruction. And as a result, they carry on having those insecurities and projecting them onto others. I probably could have made this video, 20 minutes shorter by just saying that, or 29 minutes shorter by just saying that. But I felt like it was necessary to have all that build up because that's the way I think. But yeah, it's just a lack of accountability, lack of emotional intelligence, lack of accountability, and lack of introspection, and people will paint all that stuff over the top of it, like they can just like pretend like they have those things, but you don't get those things without experiencing a few ego deaths and a little bit of misery, honestly. Like, you have to suffer a little bit, I think, to get to the point where you get it, because we all have flaws and we all fuck up. Like, that's just human nature. So, anyway, that was a long rambling video, but hopefully you got something out of it, I guess. Basically, just stop being shitty to each other, Instead of projecting your crap onto other people, accept them for who they are. Let them accept you for who you are. Be honest. Communicate openly. And when somebody slights you, don't run back to your little in-group and complain about that person. Maybe ask why that happened. Was it a reflection of you? Was it if it was a criticism, was it a genuine criticism that you deserved? Or was it BS? If it was BS, just be like, well, that was BS. I'm going to let that go. And then be done. But you don't have to, go on a tirade and try to destroy their character and make them feel bad about themselves. Just communicate honestly and openly when people hurt you so that they can change their behavior if they're self-aware enough to care enough to do so. Anyway, hopefully that helped somebody out there, or the 4 people who are going to probably watch this video. But anyway, I'm going to go to bed now. It's quite late. I think we just passed by 11:11, so catch ya. Hang loose.